something wrong with the school. Something doesn't feel right.
Sophie, what happened?
I think there's something here that's not meant to be.
What did you see?
I saw a nun. What did you do? She's standing there.
This thing, it's come back for me.
This demon was once an angel. Rejected by God. Stripped of power.
It wants that power back. It's okay to be scared. I'm scared too.
You send that thing back to hell.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Fresh Cuts. This is Mike, and joining me, as always, it's Venom. How's it going, Venom?
Greetings and salutations, people of the cloth. Yeah, I'm doing pretty well, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing well, except I almost forgot how to intro my own damn show that I do every week.
I noticed that. I'm actually surprised that you kept it. I thought you were going to start over.
Oh, man. All right. Also with us, it's Don and Ellie. How's it going, Dawn?
Yeah, what's going on? Always happy to be here, except for the last few weeks, but that's a different story.
All right. Well, let's see if the streak continues as we are covering a sequel to The Nun titled The Nun 2. Very imaginative. Not much of a surprise what it's a sequel to. So, the synopsis. 1956 France. A priest is murdered and evil is spreading. The sequel to the worldwide smash hit follows Sister Irene as she once again comes face to face with Balak, the demon nun. All right. I guess we'll get into our general thoughts like we usually do first. So I'll start with Venom. What did you think of The Nun 2?
I was a moderate fan of the Nun 1, so I kind of went into this one with fairly lowered expectations. Not a lot of the Conjuring universe has really been blowing us away over the last few franchise entries, so I kind of curbed my expectations on this one, and I'm kind of glad I did because I actually ended up enjoying this movie more than the original. I had a pretty good time with this. I actually cared about the protagonists in a lot of these kind of Blumhouse / Conjuring universe type movies. You know, it's the jump scare factory that we all expect. That is solidly there. But what surprised me was some of the character development, because obviously our two main characters are returning from the first movie, so Irene and Maurice are back, so we don't really have to do a lot of character development for that, but then that leaves us with some room to be able to do a little bit of character development with some of the newer cast, like the people at the girls' school, our main protagonist, little girl, her mother, obviously Maurice, the headmistress, So having a little bit of time to develop the newer characters, I feel like it made me care a little bit more. I actually wanted to see Maurice kind of make it through all this after everything that he went through in the first movie, and then, kind of anticipating what he's going to have to go through in this movie. I was really hoping that, he would potentially make it through this. I am so glad that I did not watch the trailer for this movie. I mean, I don't watch any trailers. You guys already know this. This has been long standing for since well before the pandemic. I haven't watched any horror movie trailers. And I say that because the magazine rack scene, I fucking loved it. I went back and watched the trailer after I saw the movie, and I'm like, oh, thank God I don't watch trailers, because they ruin one of the best scares of the movie, and not just the scare itself, but the setup to the scare. I thought was so well done, just really, really elaborate and different, and I really, really dug that. I'm really liking where Michael Chavez is going as a director. This is now his third movie in the Conjuring universe. The first one being La Llorona, which, of course, had kind of mixed reviews. And then the second one that he did was actually The Conjuring 3, which for the most part, people didn't enjoy as much as the first and the second one. I may have been the exception to that rule. I love the third one. I love that it was way more grounded, not as many over-the-top crazy villains like the Crooked Man or Valak or anything like that. It just felt a lot more grounded while still having a hard supernatural element. And now this is Chavez's third film, and I'm really liking where he's going. I really like what he did with this film. If you're a fan of the first, there's no reason you shouldn't be a fan of this one. The atmosphere is there, just like in the original. I think the storytelling is actually a little bit better. I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of the finale of the first movie. Basically the relic, the artifact that they use to defeat Valak. It's very cringy, kind of, it definitely makes you roll your eyes. No pun intended. I just realized what I said. No pun intended towards the relic for this movie. But I actually I just really enjoyed this one a little bit more as far as its finale goes. I definitely liked it more. I like the two nuns. Yeah, Storm Reed. Storm Reed was a nice little surprise of the movie. Not a very nun-like nun, obviously. She doesn't have a whole lot of faith at the beginning of the movie. But I am a fan of hers. Her portrayal of Riley on the Last of Us TV series is absolutely stellar. And it's just really good to see her here in a supporting role. She's not a star this time, but it's still always great to see her. But Tasia Farmiga, man, she carries this film. When it comes to performances and storytelling, she really carries this film, and I love that. I think she did an amazing job. I mean, she's going to get to the point where she's not going to do genre films anymore. She's going to start moving on to prestige dramas and things like that. So enjoy her now while we have her in the subgenre, because I definitely see a bright future for her. Overall, I thought the whole cast was great. No major issues or, bad line deliveries, bad dialogue. I thought the script was well done. I thought the cold open was great. Let me tell you, my friends, any movie that sets a priest on fire and kills a child on screen in the first 10 minutes, I'm on board. Now, whether the movie kept that up throughout the rest of the runtime might be a little bit debatable, but yeah, that cold open absolutely worked for me. Maybe one of my favorite cold opens of the Conjuring universe. I had a really good time with it. There's some beautiful iconography in this film. Obviously, you're dealing with religious horror, and I'm always fond of religious iconography in horror films, especially when used in a more, evil subset. So, that is solidly there. I thought Bonnie Aarons as the nun was as great as usual. She gets a little bit more screen time as the nun this time than she did last movie. A couple of really cool scenes where the camera's right it's a close-up. It's right on her face, and she's just kind of throwing these sly smiles back and forth to different people that she's messing with in the film. I thought that added a little bit of personality to the nun, almost like a fun factor that wasn't there in the first film. So overall, I mean, it sounds like I'm praising the movie, but overall, it's really an average Conjuring film. It's not nearly as bad as, say, La Llorona or the first Annabelle film, but it's definitely not what the first two Conjuring movies were and Annabelle Creation, you know? There's like the upper echelon of the Conjuring universe and the lower echelon, and thankfully this movie kind of falls somewhere in the middle, where, you know, most people I think are going to say this is just, it's average, but it's a solid Conjuring effort. And like I said earlier, if you like the first Nun, I think you're going to like this one a little bit better, because I know I did. I was a fan of the first Nun. I didn't love it. I wasn't singing its praises, but everything that I liked about the first one, we got in this one, and then we even got a little bit more. So I'm overall, I'm fairly happy with this one. Could it have been better? Of course, it can always be better, but at least I wasn't, you know, cringing and rolling my eyes throughout the entire film. I had a pretty good time with it, to the point where the movie is an hour and 50 minutes long, and as I'm walking out of the theater, I'm thinking, man, was that like an hour and 25 minutes? That felt so fast. And then I look at the runtime, and I was shocked that movie was almost 2 hours long. It's quick. I have heard some complaints about the first act maybe being a little bit slower, and maybe some people kind of finding it a little bit dull. But ultimately, even outside of the horror elements, I was still enthralled. You know, the three bully girls, you know, kind of messing with our main child actress. Oh, what was her name in the film? Sophie. Sophie was the main little girl that we were watching, and her mother, Kate, who looks incredibly like Emilia Clarke from Game of Thrones, but that's a discussion for another day. But ultimately, I'm going to say I had a pretty good time with this one. It's not vital viewing, you know, it's not something that I would say, oh, go out and see it right away. Though I will say, because of the cool atmosphere and the pretty decent sound design, if you have any interest in the Nun 2 at all, go see it in the theater. I saw it in a Dolby theater, so yeah, all the jump scares were nice and loud with the subwoofers underneath the seat. It was just a really good time overall. So yeah, I enjoyed this. I would say for me personally, an above average Conjuring universe effort. I know some people might say average to maybe slightly below average, but I still had a pretty good time with this one. And they also did the cool thing where they it's funny because I was just sitting here talking about not having like over the top characters like in the first couple of Conjuring movies, but I did actually like the fact that there's multiple antagonists in this one. It's not just Valak the nun. We actually get, you know, I mean, we get a dead little boy. We get we get one creature that I'm not going to talk about right now because it's kind of it's definitely a WTF moment when this creature first shows up on the screen. It's like, holy shit, are you kidding me? Is that really who we think it is? But you know, I thought the explanation of who the character was in the film works, whether you believe it or not. Maybe it's just little kids, you know, playing little kid games and getting confused. Or maybe it was just Valak kind of messing with these kids since they believe in the Defy the Devil game, that maybe that was just her kind of messing with them. But I'm pretty sure that Valak and this particular creature were in two different places at the exact same time. So I'm not sure the extent of Valak's power, if she has that kind of ability to kind of project another creature in another part of the building. But for whatever it's worth, I enjoyed it. I had a pretty good time with this one. I'm not going to give it a high recommend by any stretch, but if you're a fan of the Conjuring universe and you're a fan of the first Nun film, I don't think there's any reason you wouldn't like this one. So go check it out. And that's it for me for now.
Okay, let's swing things over to Dawn. Your thoughts on the Nun 2?
Well, first of all, I do have to say this. This was probably the weakest of Chavis's three films because I absolutely, utterly love La Llorona. I think that's the best of the entire universe outside of the first two Conjuring films. So I'm kind of surprised to hear you say you didn't like that one. I thought you'd be all over that one, Venom.
You know, heritage-wise, you would think I would be all over it, and I was very excited for it. I didn't hate La Llorona, don't get me wrong. And I don't think it's necessarily the worst in the Conjuring universe, but it's definitely a below-average film just for me.
Okay. Because I was gonna say, for me, that one ranks just below the first two Conjuring films. So I was kind of shocked to hear you say that you didn't like that one. So, but yeah, I mean, this is probably the weakest I think of his three, but I still think I had a pretty good time with it, especially compared to the trilogy of crap we've had to endure the last month or so. Yeah, a lot of what he said is pretty much right on. Atmosphere out the wazoo. I love the set design here. Period Gothic pieces are one of my favorite film genre entries, and so I really enjoyed that they carried that over from the first one, which was the big thing that I really liked about that one. Jump scare factory, set to 10. Well, what can be said about the magazine rack sequence? That thing was fantastic. Couple of the other sequences didn't hit as hard, but it's definitely playing in well with the setup that the universe plays well with. So I'm definitely on board with that. I don't get a real sense of what Valak is supposed to be here, or the nun, or whatever they're trying to call her. I don't get a sense of what her endgame actually is. And it was kind of similar to how I felt about her in the first one, where I don't know what she's actually trying to do here, other than just appear and, terrify people. I don't know what she's actually trying to accomplish by targeting nuns. So I don't really have this real sense of fear from her, because she doesn't actually, for me at least, seem to have an end game where she's actually there to do something, steal this relic that's being, stored safely, or, target somebody that's done her wrong in the past, or, something like that, where there's an end game to her appearance and what she's trying to do. Whereas here it just seems like, it's just, this figure shows up and it's causing mischief, and somebody's got to try to figure out how to, turn it away or stop it or put an end to things. And that's fine, but I don't really get, if we're applying Conjuring logic to this from what we know about her in part two, about this being this be all end all demon, I don't really get that from this. And it kind of just makes her feel like a, monster of the week kind of a thing, where this could have been taken out and any old, figure could have been placed in there. I don't think that that's a necessarily bad thing, but like I said, if we're trying to make this be all end all demon that this world renowned highest of the high quality paranormal investigators is scared to death of, I just don't feel it here. And I don't know if that's just, maybe I'm, incorrectly placing that kind of logic into the film, or if I'm, reading it the wrong way, but I just don't see what her end game is. And for a figure like this, where that seems to be what what the purpose of the film is supposed to be, it kind of leaves me feeling a little, like apathetic towards things by like the third act, when you don't really understand what's going on, and all you're getting is just random, jump scare factory sequences, and things popping up out of no places where they shouldn't be. I understand that that's the purpose of these kinds of films, but for me, I would really rather establish that there, like that there'd be something established about her purpose there, and I just don't get it. But other than that, I don't have too many complaints. And I mean, yeah, Venom said a lot of what I was gonna say, so I'm gonna ride that one again for most of my thoughts here. And I mean, I wish I could have seen it in that particular theater, because I do appreciate the jump scare factory approach that Blumhouse does so well. But yeah, a lot of what he said is pretty much right in line with where I stand on it. Great to see the main two again. I really liked them in the first one, so it's great to see them back again. New characters aren't annoying and irritating. They're fun to be around in the quiet scenes, when they're just trying to figure out who's who and attach names to people, so you realize who's in danger later on. nothing really stands out as being overly bad, for this kind of a genre effort. I mean, your tolerance for this Bloomhouse approach may vary, but for me, I'm a huge fan. I appreciate it and look at them as like some of the best mainstream horror, not like, indie or streaming kind of genre fare, but like mainstream blockbuster kind of theatrical work. The Bloomhouse approach is one of my favorites, and I really enjoyed just about everything. I think there's only maybe one or two entries in the franchise that I'm not a huge fan of, but yeah, overall, I don't have too much else to add. If you enjoyed the others and you're a fan of the style, I don't see why this wouldn't be a fun time. Shave maybe 5 minutes off, and I'd probably enjoy it a little better because I do think the first half could, trim off some of the repetitive motions of just going through the cast. But other than that, I don't have too much to really complain about. Other than what I brought up earlier about what Valak is supposed to be doing. But yeah, that's pretty much where I stand on things, at least.
Okay, so for me, I kind of agree with both of you guys. I do like this one slightly better than the first one. Honestly, I don't remember a ton of the first one. It's been a long time since I've seen it. I saw it in the theater. I have never seen it since, but I remember enough to know that the nun did nun things, right? The nun was a scary character that jumped out at the appropriate times for jump scares. Continued this one. I would even say maybe this one kind of ramped it up a little. Like this is, you could call this movie like, or you could approach this as, where is the nun going to pop out of next? Is it a magazine rack? Is it the wall? Is it the ground? Is it a curtain? Is it a sheet? Because the nun covers the gambit on jump scares in this one. So like for that, I think in that way it's more effective than the first even. In being that style of movie. But then I also agree with Dawn, like story wise and like the objective and what the nun's like actual objective or purpose is, I'm still not quite sure, other than to be scary, which is okay, I guess. Like if that's what the nun is there to be, if it's done effectively. I agree with Venom as far as like the sound design. It's well done. Farmiga is great, as she usually always is. I would say, like, whether you need to see this in the theater or not, it's kind of based on what you thought of the first one. If you were entertained by the first one, I would say go see it. If you didn't like the first one, I don't know, you might like this one slightly more, but I don't think it's gonna like win you over to the Nun fan club, but there is an audience for this, because this took in 32.6 domestically, winning the box office, and another 52.7 internationally. So that's a debut of 85.3 on its opening weekend. So the Nun 3 could be on its way, not anytime soon because of the strike and all that, but I mean, it made the money to justify it. And the fact that, like, so far we've had two Nun movies where it didn't really require the strongest story. People didn't care. They went to see it. They wanted to see the scary nun do scary things. And if that's the threshold for people to see it, then it's a success. So, did you guys stuck around? I'm not. We won't go over, but you stuck around for like the mid-credit scene.
Always.
Okay, yeah. Well, we can get into that during spoilers, but yeah. So like, I mean, obviously we already knew going into these movies the connective tissue to the Conjuring universe. There's a point in the movie that they kind of make it more pronounced, or not more pronounced, but they just kind of give us a little, I guess, maybe Easter egg bonus of the Conjuring universe. And yeah, I mean, I don't have a whole lot to add to the general thoughts because I kind of agree with both of you guys in what you said. I would definitely say it's a little bit better. Even the IMDb rankings would reflect that. I think the first one is sitting at 5.3. Obviously, you know, it's been out a good, 3, 4, 5 years now. So that's probably a more permanent score, where the new ones, the 6.0, a lot newer. So that could probably shift and move a lot more in the next 6 months. But it seems like reaction is kind of reflective of what we say, that this one, it's better. It's not leagues better. It's not like knock your socks off better, but it kind of does what the first one did well, just better. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I can see if the first one had a 5.1 or 5.2, like you said, I can see this one settling at 5.5, 5.6.
yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
I mean, not that,
Um,
not that we do that for real, but I can probably see that settling down somewhere in that area.
yeah, definitely agreed. I think that's like it actually for my general thoughts. Like, you guys kind of covered like everything that I had to say, both on the positive and the negative. So, I'll throw it back to you for now, Venom.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, the movie is fairly one note, and it doesn't really leave you a whole lot to talk about. It's like, yeah, Valak jumps out of here, Valak jumps out of here, Valak jumps out of here, and then we get a finale and we get to go home. So it's like walkthroughs for movies like this are usually just more about the set pieces, about the cool set pieces that are in the film, as opposed to actually like watching, character arcs and story development and things like that.
Okay, so
It's kind of funny. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say this. Not that not that I know that you guys are familiar with the original or not, but would you say that the set pieces here are better or worse than the original, if you're familiar with them? Not going into detail, but would you say they're better or worse?
I think they're better
think
in the first.
because I was
Because I
gonna say
remember, because I absolutely adore the whole thing with the nuns, with all the nuns in that scene near the end where they're all like bowing, and then their eyes. I can't remember specifically what the quote unquote horror of the scene was, but I do remember absolutely loving that scene. Whereas in this movie, obviously, the cold open is going to stick with me. The magazine rack is going to stick with me. Our little horn friend that runs around the school is going to stick with me. But I think overall, the gothic atmosphere and element of the first one, especially because it's the first time you experience it, it just felt a little bit fresher, a little bit better. Whereas the second time around, you have to do a lot more to get that same kind of fresh feeling of, yeah, I just saw something new and different. So I'm going to say I would lean towards the first.
see, I definitely agree. I think the magazine rack is probably the standout of the two, just individually. But I think overall, as a collective whole, I do think the original is maybe just like like slightly better. I think just overall, like you said, the finale is one of my favorite parts of that one, and I'm struggling to think because it's been a few years since I've seen it, and I actually looked it up to compare, and I can't even find my review for it. So it must have been before I started reviewing, so it's not there. And I didn't have enough time to go back and because I came home from the theater and I went to look at it and I went to like compare the two because I was going to come up with this and see what you guys thought about them based on just being jump scare factory sequences. And I went to find my review and it wasn't there. So I checked around and it must have been before I started doing it, so it's not online. So I was like, crap, I don't have time to go do it since I got home from work late. But yeah, I was gonna say I think overall, I think as an individual set piece, I think this one here maybe has like a better individual one, but I think overall, I think as a whole, part one is a little bit better.
Yeah, I can see that. Let's see. There's a scene in the movie where a spirit entity villain, whatever you want to go with, uses one of those. What do you call those things? The little the altar boys carry them, and there's smoke coming out of them. I think they're burning like some kind of sage or incense in there, and he's just kind of swinging it to kind of bless the church. I know that thing has a name, but I'm not a religious person, so I have no idea what the name of that thing is. But there's
sage balls. Those like sage balls.
Possibly. That sounds quite valid, actually. Yeah, I'll go with that. But yeah, the scene with the headmistress of the school and that antagonist that uses that sage ball on her, I love that scene. Because anytime I see somebody doing something unholy with a holy artifact or a holy relic, I'm on board for. My nipples get hard. I get all happy. And yeah, that scene really, really worked for me here too. So, yeah, I mean, there's some memorable set pieces here. Like I said, if we're talking scares, I would probably lean towards the first because everything is so fresh and new, and you're not aware of it yet. You haven't spent 2 whole movies with Valak at that point. And here it's like, okay, we know who Valak is. We know her tricks or his tricks, depending on the gender of the demon. Do demons have genders? I don't know. But yeah, like, we already know about Valak. We know what they like to do, what she likes to do, what, the jump scares and everything else. So you kind of have to give us something a little bit new, which they didn't really give us. But I will say that some of the just extended tension in the scenes were really, really good. There was a scene later in the film where the teacher, Kate, is running through the school with a bunch of the students, of the girls at the school. And that's like an extended scene of like just tension and dread, and everything else. And another scene that I'm glad I didn't see in the trailer, because they put that scene in the trailer too. The scene where the little girl climbs through the air duct and sees, what she sees in the room. Like, that's in the trailer. That would have been ruined for me too. So yeah. It seems like every other horror movie I watch, I get more and more reasons to not watch trailers. So yeah, there you go. Man, what else can we talk about that doesn't tread into spoilers? I thought Maurice was great, though. If you guys really pay attention to the original Conjuring film, I think where Maurice is going after this. I don't want to say anything. It's not really a spoiler because the original Conjuring film's like what? The 2000s? So Conjuring scholars will know what I'm talking about when it comes to Maurice and the original Conjuring film. If you don't, I'm not going to spoil it. Go back and watch the original Conjuring. I know it's probably been a long time for a lot of people, but it's funny how the original Conjuring kind of almost guarantees that we're getting a Nun 3. And I'm not going to say why. I'll let you guys try to figure it out. But yeah. But like I said, there's not really a whole lot to nitpick in this movie. Yeah, I wish there was more gore. Yeah, I wish there was more on-screen kills. I wish there were almost any on-screen kills. I mean, this is not to say that there's no kills in this film. Of course there are. But you get the majority of them in the cold open. And then you only get like 1 or 2 scattered throughout the film. So the body count is fairly low, considering Valak is like an uber, powerful demon. I'd like to see a bigger body count. I'd like to see but obviously, again, it's Blumhouse. Was this PG-13? No, this was rated R. So yeah, there's no reason they couldn't have gone.
This was R?
This was rated R. According to IMDb, I'm looking at it right now, rated R.
Holy crap.
Yeah, there wasn't even that much language. I mean, because obviously the whole movie takes place in monasteries or a girls' school, so there's not a whole lot of language in here either. So that's a weird one. But yeah, it is rated R according to this. Too bad. I don't know. What else can we talk about here? Obviously, I don't have notes since this was a theatrical release, but yeah, overall. Oh, and I don't know if I mentioned it earlier. I might have, but I actually love that the bully chick in this one kind of gets hers a little bit later in the film. You guys know that I'm a petty, vindictive bastard, and if you piss me off throughout the course of a film, I want to see you get hurt. And I'm very happy that despite the bully in this being a teenage girl, she still gets a gnarly injury later in the film, which made me smile from ear to ear. But we'll talk about that a little bit. Man, not a lot of priests in this movie. Did you notice the lack of priests in this movie? Like, it seems like the only couple of priests that we get are like set on fire. Oh, and then the main guy from the Vatican who comes and tells Irene, which kind of. One of the reviews I read for this movie actually said that scene almost makes it feel like a Men in Black situation. That, this guy who's a representative of the Pope just shows up and says, "Oh, I need you to go investigate this thing since you have experience with it." it comes off as very police procedural, which is kind of weird. But yeah, somebody called it Men in Black in the Church, and I found that kind of funny. I don't know. You guys got anything else to kind of discuss before we get into spoilers?
Just that I agree with you that the priest set on fire scene is excellent.
I mean, anytime anybody's set on fire, like literally just set ablaze like that, like very Hereditary, I'm on board for. And if it's a priest, even better.
Yeah.
I'm a dick. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and being willing to off kids is never a bad thing in a horror movie either.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a quick scene, but at least it was on screen. I'm kind of sick of kid deaths in horror movies being off screen or being fairly tame. Nah, this one's not quite, what Dr. Sleep is. That kill scene of a child is probably one of the most epic child kill scenes ever. But still, to be able to see a kid die on, man, people must think I hate kids, and I really don't. I just like when movies don't limit themselves and don't censor themselves and actually go after the taboo. You know what I mean? So I'll give a movie credit for that anytime. All right, folks, this is your final spoiler warning. We're going to get into our very quick walkthrough of this one. I mean, if you've seen a Blumhouse movie, you've seen The Nun too, but let's go over it anyway. Our movie opens up in a cold open. We are brought to a church where we see a priest and his altar boy preparing the sacrificial wine for the mass. After the mass is over, we see the little boy taking the glass, like carboy. I think they're called carboys. If you homebrew, you know what a carboy is. If you don't homebrew, you probably don't. So for the few people out there who might actually make their own beer at home, basically the altar boy has a carboy of wine that he's bringing back down to the basement where they keep it. Of course, when he's down there, he gets freaked out by something. He goes running up the stairs to let the priest know, I don't think we're alone. There's somebody here. The priest instantly believes the boy and goes out into the main part of the church, the altar and the pews and everything, and is basically like, they can hear that there's something going on. It's not ultra loud, but there's knocking, there's footsteps, there's noises that aren't normal. Eventually the priest comes up to the altar, asks if anyone is there, and suddenly he just goes into the Jesus Christ pose and floats about 10 feet up in the air, and just is set on fire. Literally, he just boom, bursts into flame. Just an awesome, awesome image. Our altar boy, obviously freaks out. He runs away. Unfortunately, you ain't getting away from Valak that easy. Eventually, Valak does catch up to the boy, grabs him by the neck, pins him up to the wall, snaps his neck, and basically, she had to have continued, even after snapping the neck, she had to have continued to attack the boy, because then we see blood start flowing down the rest of the body. But the neck break we see, it's right on fucking screen. It's awesome. So kudos there. And then we go to our title card. That's the end of our cold open. After that, we are reintroduced to Maurice. If you remember Maurice, who was the survivor, the final boy, if you will, from the first Nun movie. He is now, where does this movie take place? The second, it is all France. Okay, it's just different parts of France. Okay. So basically Maurice has moved to a different part of France. He now works at a girls' school, trying to obviously get his life straightened up after the events of the first film. We are also introduced to Kate, who seems to be the only teacher at this school. It's a fairly small school. It is a girls' school. All the girls are right around the same age. Like there's no drastic differences in age. It's not like there's 5-year-olds running around with 16-year-olds or anything. For the most part, they're like, early to mid-teenage girls. We are introduced to Kate. She's like the instructor to these girls, and her daughter. What's her daughter's name? I forgot already. Sophie, her daughter Sophie, is a classmate here. She attends this school with her mother teaching classes, and so we get a little bit of character development there, a little bit of introductions. We meet the headmistress, Madame Laurent, as they call her, and we meet a couple other nuns too throughout, but and then we meet our bullies. Our bullies are Simone, Celeste, and I forgot the name of the third girl, or should I say it's not listed here on IMDb, but Simone, Celeste being kind of the ringleader bully, Simone being kind of her toady that does anything that Celeste asks her to do, blah blah blah, and eventually, we are reintroduced to Sister Irene, of course, the hero from the first film. And basically, she is getting just like weird premonitions and things like that. Like she feels like something is off. Eventually, a representative of the Pope comes down to her monastery and, as I mentioned earlier, basically tells her, we don't think the demon has been vanquished. We think the demon is back because, blah, blah, blah. During this scene, it's kind of not even implied. They actually show us the fact that Valak possesses Maurice in a way that we obviously when we watch the first movie, we know that Maurice was being possessed. But by the time the movie is over, we figure Valak has been dispatched and Maurice is no longer possessed. This is where we get the reveal that Maurice was possessed the entire time. We see a scene where Malik is holding Maurice up by his neck, and a snake, like a serpent of some kind, comes out of her mouth and goes into Maurice's mouth, basically possessing him. So this is, like I said, this is where we get the reveal that Maurice has been possessed this entire time, but Valak has just been kind of biding her time to try to figure out what's what. Now, the priest thinks, the representative of the Pope thinks that he knows what Valak is going after. And earlier in the film, we have Sister Irene talk to Sister Deborah about St. Lucy of Syracuse, and St. Lucy is the patron saint of the blind. And we actually get a pretty sad story about how some very anti-religious people who lived in the same village as St. Lucy, or as Lucy, basically hated her. They thought that she was evil, blah, blah, blah. They actually tried to burn her at the stake like a witch, but she wouldn't burn. The story is that the flames wouldn't keep up. They just kept going out, and that she wouldn't burn. So the townspeople were getting upset about it. So then they decided to basically poke out her eyes. They literally stab her in both of her eyes. We do see this in a flashback scene, thankfully. And then eventually, after her eyes are poked out, they're able to actually set her on fire officially this time. But as basically a middle finger to God and the church, they do not bury St. Lucy's body with her eyes. They keep her eyes. So basically, they keep her eyes in like a metal tin, and it's just passed down from generation to generation within this family. This family that, apparently had a problem with St. Lucy when she was alive. It is revealed, or the representative of the Pope basically says that that's what he thinks Valak is after. He thinks that if Valak gets a hold of the eyes of St. Lucy, she will be like all powerful and basically be able to open portals and let demons in and blah, 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 blah. But then he tells Irene the eyes can be the downfall of humanity, but they also could defend us. You could potentially use them as a very powerful weapon against Valak. It doesn't really give her any explanation, just says that they could be used as a powerful weapon. So basically the film is just Irene and Deborah trying to figure out where the eyes of St. Lucy might be. As it turns out, the family who had the eyes basically buried them under a monastery. I don't know why, but that's what they did. They buried it under a monastery. The monastery was eventually sold to a winery. So the monastery became a winery, and then after the winery went out of business, that's when it became the girls' school that we see today. So there are multiple scenes in this movie when we go down to the basement and there's barrels of wine all over the place. Seems odd, you might say. Why would winemakers leave a bunch of full barrels of wine? Well, don't forget, Valak is potentially at this location. And if the people that made the wine were haunted, it makes complete sense that they would have just said, fuck the wine, let's get out of here. I ain't going back in there to get the wine, let's just go. So, I'll suspend disbelief there for why a girls' school has upwards of 50 barrels of wine in the basement, which actually does come into play later on in the film, but we'll get into that.
Well, I was going to say religion should drive anyone to drink.
I like it. Oh, man. Okay, so anyway, the point is that once the priest says the winery is now a girls' school, instantly Irene remembers that Maurice, after the events of the first movie, went to a girls' school to, just kind of get his life back together, continue doing the kind of the groundskeeping work that he was doing in the first movie. So basically, Irene and Deborah decide, okay, we have to go to the girls' school where Maurice now is. They end up getting there, but by the time they get there, the shit has already hit the fan. Like, Maurice is already actively acting, like he is possessed. He is actively attacking people. I got to give credit for Maurice, man. He will, and Maurice, of course, possessed by Valak, but he does not have any problem smacking teenage girls around a fucking building. At one point, he hits one of the girls so hard she flies across the room and into a window. He does the exact same thing to Irene later in the film. Like, this guy I should say Valak. Valak has no love for these people because just smacking them around, and how these people get back up. I mean, Irene looks like she's 98 pounds soaking wet, but she gets slammed up against the wall and still is able to get up. Now, there was one important thing that I kind of skipped over, and that was deny the devil. Basically, the three bully girls take Kate's daughter, Sophie, to a closed off part of the school. It's basically an old chapel that isn't in use anymore. It's closed off supposedly because it's dangerous. People could get hurt in there, blah, blah, blah. They end up going in there because all the girls at the school play this game called Deny the Devil. And what it is inside of the chapel, there's still stained glass windows. One of the stained glass windows is a goat with a red eye. And they say that that's Satan. That's a representation of Lucifer in the stained glass. They say that if you stand at a certain spot at a certain time of day, the sun will shine through the eye so that the eye is glowing red. Once the eye starts glowing red, you have to continue staring at it. If you look away, if you break your gaze from the stained glass window, supposedly Satan, yes, Satan himself, will appear in the form of a monstrous goat and basically torment you. So when they play the game, actually Sophie does really, really well. She sits there, she does not break the gaze, and when the sun finally moves away enough that the red eye is no longer shining, she looks away, realizes that the three girls have left her in there by herself. She goes running to the gated door. They're at the door holding it shut so that she can't get out, of course. Sophie's screaming, trying to get out. And then Maurice shows up and he's able to save the day and, get her out of there. That's important because later in the film, we actually do get a physical representation of that goat. There's a great scene in a spiral staircase in the school where after the shit has hit the fan and Maurice is solidly possessed and Valak basically isn't hiding her appearance anymore, it's Deborah, Storm Reed's character. she's looking for the rest of the girls so that she can gather them all up and they can stay together. While she's at the stairs going up there, she's at the lower level. At about the middle level is the girls' dormitory where they sleep, and then there's like an attic up at the third level. So when Deborah shines her flashlight up to see, I think it's Simone, when she turns her flashlight up to see Simone, she sees that Simone is on the second floor, and then Simone says, "I think there's someone upstairs." Deborah then tilts the flashlight even higher up to the third floor, and we see a horned figure crouching in the corner. Eventually, Deborah is able to angle the flashlight enough so that she could shine it right on the creature, and it is a fucking monstrous goat creature. Literally, it's like a humanoid. It does kind of look like Satan. I mean, red eyes, horns. It runs on all fours, but it still has very humanoid qualities to it. Like, it could easily stand up on its hind legs and look fairly human, but I just thought that was an awesome like addition to the film. On top of Valak, we also got this great. I don't want to say Satan because I don't think it's actually Satan.
It's a souped
I
up,
think that's just Valak.
It's a super version of Black Phillip.
Yeah, I'll go with that. It's even Blacker Phillip. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I don't think it was actually Satan. I think that's just Valak fucking with the girls' fear because they have the fear of the deny the devil game. So she's just like, fuck it. It's kind of like the little kid in The Conjuring who had the crooked man carousel. And then later in the film, the crooked man comes to life and chases the kid. So, which gave us a nice little set piece. So yeah, same thing with here, with this one. We get a cool set piece with the goat creature kind of chasing the girls around. Eventually, the creature gets Kate and the rest of the girls trapped in a room. And the main bully, Celeste, the ringleader of the bullies, she's got her back against the door and she's holding the door shut because, the goat creature is right outside the door trying to get in. And we just hear a big slam as the goat creature literally slams its horns through the door, and one of them goes through Celeste's chest. It's on the opposite side of her heart, so it's probably not fatal, depending on if they punctured a lung. I think it might have been above the lungs. It might have been pretty close to the shoulder. But yeah, just to see that dumb little bitch kind of get her comeuppance for all the shit that she pulled on Sophie throughout the film, it makes a petty guy like me very happy. So I thought that was a nice little addition. Eventually, we do get a set piece where the headmistress goes into the chapel after it's locked up, and she ends up seeing the spirit of her son, who was an altar boy. And I'm not sure if he died in that chapel. Maybe that's why. Because they never give us an explanation as to why the chapel is locked, other than it's not safe, which is true. I mean, if you look in there, it's all decrepit and shitty. So they're not exactly exaggerating necessarily. But obviously something happened in there. So the headmistress one night goes in there after finding Maurice at the entrance in a trance. Maurice was just kind of standing at the entrance, staring at the door in a trance. The headmistress kind of wakes him up, snaps him out of it, tells him to go back to his room. She then enters the chapel to find out what the hell, everybody's so infatuated with the chapel for. And while she's in there, she sees the ghostly image of her dead child. And, she calls out to him. She starts to get sad. And this is the scene where he's got that sage ball, I guess. And he just starts using it like a morning star and just starts beating the shit out of his mother with this thing until finally she not falls, but like kind of is pushed backwards towards a set of metal hooks. I'm not sure what the purpose of these metal hooks are, but there's like a series of metal hooks on a like stand in that chapel. Eventually, Valak or whoever makes one of those hooks fall down. It slams right into the top of the woman's head, and she basically bleeds out and dies. Her body is found the next day, and which just kind of jumpstarts, more of what's going on here. I guess we can kind of start getting towards the end. Like I said, I'm skipping multiple set pieces. There's a great set piece where the girls are trying to escape in the third act. They end up finding the air shaft that goes into the headmistress's bedroom. One of them, I believe it is Celeste herself, actually goes in there through the air duct, sees the headmistress image, spirit, whatever you want to go with, in the room. Eventually she gets attacked. It's kind of funny because I think most people expected that to be Valak, but it was actually the headmistress who had just died a couple of days earlier. So that was kind of interesting. And then that leads us to the final confrontation. Basically, we're in the basement. Valak is down there in all her glory, no longer hiding her appearance. She's just out in the open, like, fuck you, look at me, here I am. Maurice is still possessed, and at one point, what do you call it? What's her name? Irene. Basically, Sister Irene tries to help Maurice by taking. Oh, I forgot to mention, they do eventually find the eyes of Saint Lucy, and they are in the chapel, buried under the ground. It turns out that the light shining through the red eye of the goat is actually it's Indiana Jones all over again. Basically, it points to the spot on the ground where the eyes of Saint Lucy are buried. They eventually figure that out. They dig up the eyes. And basically, during the finale, Maurice attacks Irene. She still has the eyes in her hand in the metal tin. She basically holds them up against Maurice's forehead, starts saying some prayers. Obviously, Maurice reacts very violently to it. He ends up falling to the ground with blood coming out of every orifice on his head. Eyes, ears, nose, mouth. There's just blood coming out of everything, and his eyes are open. So it looks like Maurice is dead. It looks like in the process of exorcising Valak out of Maurice's body, he ends up dying. Lo and behold, he does end up getting up again later and continuing his attack against Irene. Eventually, Valak is able to corner Irene, and she is able to get the eyes away from her. And then Valak has the eyes in her hand, and this is where she basically turns into like a 12-foot fucking demon standing in the church. I'm sure she didn't actually grow to that height, but basically it looks like she starts to float, but her clothing, whatever you call nunnery, the nun's clothing, the habit, that's it. Basically, the habit also extends. So she's floating about 12 feet in the air, but the habit is extending all the way down to the ground. So it actually looks like Valak is like, standing 12 feet above everybody. Eventually, Irene is able to kind of figure out that they were able to defeat Valak with the blood of Christ in the first movie. If you guys remember earlier, I mentioned that the finale of the first movie was a little, over the top, in the sense that somehow thousands of years later, they somehow still have liquid blood of Christ. Like, they have the actual blood of the man himself in a vial, and that they utilize that to defeat Valak in the first one. Obviously, that's not an option for this movie. There is no more blood of Christ that anybody knows about, but we have a basement full of sacrificial wine that hasn't been blessed yet. So in the course of the battle, the fairly long, finale battle of the film, multiple barrels of wine are broken open. They get smashed, people get smashed into them, debris gets smashed into them, and eventually there's a nice layer of wine right on the ground, basically connecting, it's touching everything in the room, including the other barrels of wine. And eventually Irene comes up with the idea of, okay, let's pray and bless this wine. So her and Deborah, they basically put their hands together. They put their hands onto the wine on the ground. They say, a prayer to bless the wine. And basically, as soon as Irene says amen at the end of the prayer, all of the barrels of wine explode and pretty much engulf Valak. And Valak basically is set on fire, which she's been doing to multiple people throughout the movie, including Irene at one point. But luckily, Irene was able to get out of it. And yeah, basically the sacrificial wine engulfs her. She deteriorates into nothing. Maurice wakes up, alive and well and not possessed, at least according to what we know. And that's the end of our film. I mean, we get a happy little conclusion where we see Maurice and Kate. And I didn't even mention the fact that Maurice and Kate have like a developing romance throughout the film. And to the point where little Sophie is actually happy about it. She likes Maurice and she wants her mom to kind of get together with them. So this little, blossoming romance kind of develops throughout the movie. And then at the end of the movie, after Valak has been dispatched and Irene is once again leaving to go back to her home monastery, we see Maurice back to normal, back to planting his tomatoes. We see Kate and Sophie, everybody's happy, and Irene and Deborah say their goodbyes, and off they go, and the credits start to roll, and we think that's the end of our film, but of course this is a Conjuring film, very much like a Marvel movie. You have to expect at least a mid-credits scene, and we do get that. And what we end up getting with this one, if you guys remember in The Conjuring 1, when the Warrens are in class and they're showing the film footage of the exorcism that they performed, do you remember who that exorcism was on? They said it was a French farmer named Maurice. And the footage in the film is older. It shows an older Maurice, on top of the fact that it shows Ed and Lorraine Warren performing an exorcism. Don't forget, this movie takes place in 1956. Ed and Lorraine Warren are probably teenagers in the 50s. So that's what I was talking about earlier, that we kind of know Maurice's fate. Maurice is still fucked. It sucks because he got his happy ending. He's Valak free. He's got a burgeoning romance, but if you remember the scene from the original Conjuring, there's going to be a Nun 3 and Maurice is fucked. So yeah, kind of a spoiler within a 15-year-old movie, but I kind of like it. I thought it was a cool little send back. Anyway, the scene itself, we hear a phone ringing. This is the mid-credits scene. We hear a phone ringing, and then we hear someone pick it up, and we hear a female voice go, Mr. Warren, someone wants to speak to you. And then we see Ed and Lorraine Warren, Vera Farmiga, and Patrick Wilson. They come on the phone, or Patrick, Ed Warren goes on the phone, and he says, yes, and it's a priest on the phone. He says, yes, Father, what can we do for you? And then we don't hear what's being said on the other line, but we can see that both Vera and Patrick's facial expression kind of changes, like, time to go to work. And that's where the movie ends. So basically, this is setting up what will eventually be the Warrens exorcising the spirit from Maurice. Will they be successful? Will they not? We'll have to find out in The Conjuring 4. Or into The Nun 3, whichever one comes first.
The Nunjuring.
The Nunjuring. I like my title. The Nun 2, even nunnier.
That is The Nun 2.
Yeah, overall, like I said, the more I talk about it, the more I kind of like it. Multiple set pieces that I like, multiple characters that I like, and an element of horror films that always frustrates me is bullying among little kids. Like, when a group of kids bullies, the outcast. But in this movie, it wasn't insipid. You know what I mean? Like, you could stand it. Like, they weren't trying to hurt Sophie. They were just fucking with her. They were playing pranks on her. It's not like the girls knew Valak was in there. So, in their defense. But yeah,
Yeah.
that
And
was
it's not like it was Fear Street 78 where the pranks are actually malicious
exactly.
acts that are actually going to kill somebody if they pull it off.
Exactly. Yeah, big time. They're just kind of little kids, messing with the only girl who has her mom there at the school, the princess, if you will. So, they feel the need to kind of knock her down a peg or two. But ultimately, even those scenes weren't insipid to me. I didn't hate watching the bullying. They didn't lay it on too thick. We didn't get excessive scenes of bullying, only like one or two. So yeah, just overall, I really did enjoy this movie.
All right, cool. So that's going to wrap up our chat on the Nun 2 and this episode, but let's find out where else we can be heard. So, Venom, what do you got?
All right. No More Room in Hell presents Creature Comforts. Episode 19 is available, or at least it should be by the time you are listening to this episode. I did submit the episode to our network head to get uploaded, but I didn't see a message from him today. I will hit him up tonight and make sure that he saw my message, because I didn't even get a response. But the episode is ready. It's out, it's in the hands of our network head. It's just a matter of it getting uploaded, so look out for that. On that episode, we looked at the Ray Harryhausen classic 20 Million Miles to Earth from 1957, one of Don's favorites. So Don's going to have a lot of positives to say. So check out that episode when you can. The main show, episode 55, still our latest episode. As of right now, knock on wood, we have plans to record episode 56 this Friday, which are my picks. I'm not going to tell you what the picks are, but I will say we're heading to Japan for our next episode of the main show. And not classic Japan either. We're talking modern Japanese movies. So let that stew in your brain for a couple of weeks. But yeah, hopefully, if everything goes well, that gets recorded this Friday. And hopefully we'll be out maybe by the end of next week. Other than that, I am preparing to take off to Las Vegas tomorrow morning. I'm flying to Vegas for work, but I'm going to partake in as much debauchery as I can get my hands on. So this is going to be the shortest Vegas trip. I've never been to Vegas for less than a week. I'm only going to be there for 2 days. Literally, I fly out Tuesday morning. I fly back Thursday night. So I don't know how much debauchery you can get in 2.5 days while still working, because this is a work trip technically. So I'll report in next week with all of the highlights.
Sounds great. Sounds fun. There won't be any shortage of opportunity, that's for sure. All right, Dawn, what about you? What do you got?
Yeah, as mentioned, Creature Comforts, which, should be available sooner rather than later. Hopefully much, much, much sooner, if all goes well, according to that particular story. We have the latest episode of the Joe Blow Horror Show, which is finally available, which is me joining the guys to look at Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. Trying to say all three words there at once. But yeah, that one was a lot of fun. And it should be available as part of their Resident Evil franchise retrospective, which was a lot of fun. And I'm definitely looking forward to more with them. And I don't know if I mentioned it last time, but we are in the final month of season 2 for Horror Countdown. Getting to be the time of the year where the show takes a break. So this is the final 3 episodes, and the latest one is streaming releases that should have been theatrical. So Shudder, Netflix, Hulu, Tubi, places like that. Not releases that should have gone to theaters but were dumped on a streaming service. I mean, releases that were streaming only releases that should have been theatrical. So yeah, that one was a lot of fun, and should be available now as we prepare for the final few episodes, and I've got some good stuff prepared. So hopefully I'm going to end season 2 on a bang. So if you're interested, go ahead and check that one out. But yeah, other than that, I don't have anything else available.
All right. As far as me, nothing as of yet, but as Venom mentioned, we've got No More Room in Hell episode 56 scheduled, so hopefully that will record Friday. And then what do we what's releasing in the theater this week, Venom? Do you know?
This week we have A Haunting in Venice and Satanic Hispanics.
Okay. Yeah.
Satanic Hispanics is probably not a wide release. Haunting in Venice definitely is. I'm not even 100% sure how excited you guys are for Venice, for Haunting in Venice, because it is an Agatha Christie story. But it's her story that kind of leans in the horror subgenre more heavily than any of her other stories. So,
yeah,
it is a horror
I've
story.
Seen the trailer a couple times. I've seen the trailer a couple times at the theater. It looks kind of like a mystery thriller with horror leanings.
Mm-hmm. So, like I said, we've got that. We've got Satanic Hispanics. I don't think I never got a chance to see Megalomaniac this weekend. That sucks. I ended up getting kind of busy. But as I flip through my AMC listings, yeah, it looks like those are the only ones.
Okay. Yeah, and we can also, I mean, it's only Monday, so we can keep an eye on like what the VOD schedule looks like as well, just in case.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully,
All right.
I'm not sure if Satanic Hispanics is getting a simultaneous theatrical VOD release. I'm hoping, but if not, you know, we could wait for its official VOD release. It's up to you guys.
Yeah, because I think a while back I saw it's getting like a showtime here, but it might be one of those like one night event, and it's at one specific theater, so makes it kind of difficult to plan around that. So.
Yep.
Hopefully, if it's not a simultaneous VOD release, hopefully it's like a near future VOD release, and then we can tackle it at that time. But yeah, we'll figure it out. There'll be plenty of releases probably by the end of the week. So with that said, thank you everybody for listening to another episode of Fresh Cuts. We will be back next week with another episode. So let's say bye to our listeners.
Later.
As Hulk Hogan always said, drink your milk, take your vitamins, and say your prayers, or Valak will come get you.